The subcommittee meets twice a year, and the full interagency team meets 3 times a year.
Most of our meetings are an hour to an hour and a half in length. We don't want them to be too long. We want people to feel like they can come in, get what they need, and then go home and not have to stay too long in terms of their commitment. And the content we're looking for is really to focus on providing those opportunities for networking and for people to share resources. We do have action items that we're bringing up at the meetings, but really focusing on the chance for everybody to come in and share what their resources are in terms of transition.
So we do have a set agenda for every meeting that we do send out to the interagency team before the meeting, so people come and they feel prepared to share. But we've found that after the meeting or as the meeting is closing up, people like to just sometimes spend more time and just share some resources or collaborate about a student or an initiative that we have going. So, we expect that our meetings are an hour, but sometimes, and very happily, they go much longer than that. In the beginning, we did a self-assessment of what our district needed as far as transition, but most importantly, is what the high school needed at that time. So we sat down with our subcommittee, which is a smaller group, and we did some self-assessments. We reached out to families of students who had recently graduated, and we talked to our special education department. And looking at that self-assessment, we came up with some action items or initiatives that we thought were a priority at that time. We're in the process of doing that now because we've sort of finished some of those action items, and we can talk about those. But we're just always going back to what does the district need right now? Where are the goal areas for our students, and what initiatives can we put in place to get those successful outcomes, for those students?
And at first, really the main priorities that we had were outreach to the community. We realized that our district didn't have a lot of community involvement going on, and we also realized that parents weren't really in the loop in terms of all the resources that were available to their children. So getting the communication out to the parents was one of the things that came out of the self-assessment that we did, and the community outreach as well. And so that became the driving force at first, and as the team has continued to evolve and we've been able to meet some of those needs, we are continuing to look at how things change as time goes on, address new needs. So some of the strategies that we used early on were really to make face-to-face contact or phone contact with all of the people that we were interested in inviting. And since that started and we made those initial contacts, now we really rely on email and letting people know at the beginning of the year, these are when our meetings are coming up, and keeping them informed about times and the agenda and all the details that are involved. And as we've started to have meetings go on, we get people always referring new contacts. You should invite so-and-so from this agency, and that has continued to give us new contacts that we have reached out for and gotten involved into the program.
Another strategy is just come, just show up. We didn't sort of give anybody any homework or any really high expectation to come prepared in any way. So the face-to-face contacts were really important, just to say, this is something we're excited about, this is something we're trying to get going. Do you feel like this is something you want to participate in? And just come. Maybe you have something that you might want to share that's easy for you to bring along, whether it be a brochure or a form or just some new resource that you want to share, but we're not asking you to do any major prep work. Please just come, and I think that was really effective. Just come and hear what we have to say and see if it's something that you want to be a part of. So I think that was a good strategy in the beginning. We worked a lot on how to run an effective meeting by making people feel really comfortable about being there. And it really just started with having the right space, having the right amount of chairs, the right amount of table space for people to move around. We wanted to feed them. We wanted to make them stay. So just asking them about what they needed in that time frame. Little things like temperature control. There was one day where the heat wasn't working and we were sweating, so we went and quickly got a fan. But just having place cards so that people do introductions, but in the course of an hour meeting, you might forget who that person is across the table. We are a timekeeper, a note taker, sticking to that time. So, you know, when you want to be sort of effective and efficient with their time, you want to be cognizant of how comfortable they are, getting them there on time and making sure that they're able to leave on time and get stuff done in between. So,
yeah, one of our, I think, main concerns has been, you know, we're inviting people to come, but we want this team to last over the years. We want it to be able to sort of perpetuate itself, and part of that is, you know, hopefully allowing people to walk away and feel like they got something out of it and like they weren't wasting their time, that the whole of the meeting was helpful and beneficial to everyone involved. So we've really focused on trying to trim down our agendas and, you know, highlight the types of activities in a meeting that everyone is going to feel connected to, so that we don't have, you know, several people who are sitting there thinking, well, I don't really need to be there for this part of it. And that's taken some time, I think, for Kelly and I to get our own comfort level with just deciding what's important and what's not, and really focusing on giving everyone a chance to speak and everyone a chance to get involved. And I think for our first couple meetings, we had this goal of everyone at the table should be speaking at least twice in this meeting. And if we're not accomplishing that, then we're not really accomplishing the mission of the team. Finding different ways to do that. So resource mapping played an essential role at the very beginning of when we created the team, because we wanted to first, you know, before we even had our first interagency team meeting, we wanted to have a firm grasp on what were the resources at our disposal as a district, and kind of figure all those things out so that we could present them to the team at our first meeting. And from that point on, resource mapping has been an essential part of what we're talking about. One of the hallmarks of the meeting, so to speak, was getting people into this open forum session where everyone can go around and discuss what's new, what's going on with their agencies, what are their new agendas and initiatives, and it's all sharing resources. And not only for our benefit, but for the benefit of everyone else at the table. And a lot of conversation is generated around different agencies realizing that, oh, I didn't know that you offered that too, or I didn't know that we could get our people connected to that. So there's a lot of interagency connections that happen when people discuss the resources that they have available.
The most important project in our first year, that was our biggest outcome and our biggest goal, was, again, to get to those agencies and introduce ourselves. And, you know, some of the housekeeping things, like finding the right contact person with the right email and the right phone number. You know, sometimes I would go into an agency thinking that I was going to speak to one person, but I would end up down the hall, you know, connecting with the other person, the person that was going to come to the interagency meeting. So that was really important to us. Do we have the right people? Do we have the right agencies? And are we reaching out in all the right places? So that was a big project. It did take some time. And then to get the communication going with those folks. We've had many projects, but the ones that we're most proud of, I mean, this last year was, I think, kind of our best year in that, you know, we executed the transition fair, which, you know, we just can't say enough about how good that felt, that people came and it was well received. Our transition checklist is a project that we finished, in that we finished the hard copy and we put the online electronic copy on our website. We are still working on sort of launching that in our department. We want to launch it in our department, and then we want to go back and launch it at our elementary schools and work backwards. So that's something we're still working on, but we are proud of the finished product. Our website is, you know, something that is just so exciting, and we're finding that so many people are using it. It's a wonderful resource for families who are going off, you know, working with students going off to four-year colleges, and families who are just looking for options for transportation or guardianship, or just sort of a one-stop shopping on the website. So those are some of the greatest outcomes we've had, and I mean, this year we're thinking about what's coming up next. So we got some work to do.
So really, in terms of our philosophy, the starting point that we began with was keeping it a low level of commitment for everybody involved. We knew that we were inviting people who were busy and who had a lot of demands on them, and we wanted to make sure that they felt like they could just show up, come to the meeting. We'll get everything going from there, and I think that worked out well. And I think people have seen the benefit of just coming, and the meeting itself is a productive activity in terms of resource mapping, like we spoke about earlier, and the communication that we're able to generate there. The other thing too is, in terms of our philosophy, is really just making sure that everybody has a voice at the meeting. As I said before, that people come, they know they're going to have a chance to share all the news and information that they want to get out about their agencies, so that it's a partnership. It's not just about Shrewsbury Public Schools, it's about everyone coming to the table and all of us meeting each other's needs.
When I think about sort of maintenance, or even just initiating, I think people were looking to us, and we felt like we needed to maintain a level of energy. It was something that we were excited about. We wanted other people to get excited about it, and we were surprised when they showed up and were like, wow, you're just excited as we are, that's great. When I think about maintenance, I think about, after the meeting's over, Dan has a nice way with following up with an email, and the action items that came out of that meeting, and sort of updating people on the progress that we're making towards those action items, so that they can see that we're still excited about what we're doing. The meeting's not over, everybody folds up their things and they leave, and maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. I think it's important to keep people updated, to say, this is what's happening. We're still moving towards this goal. We're excited about it. It's launching. It's happening. Kids are using the resource, and to share that every time, so that the train just doesn't, leave the station and sort of stop somewhere in the middle on the tracks. So that train keeps rolling, and that excitement keeps, happening. So.
And I think having two people working on the project has made a huge difference, because we have to be there to motivate each other and to get things going. And even for example, this year we had the transition fair very early on. It was in September, right after school had started, and it was a huge time investment and energy on our part, and everybody else who participated getting that going. And then after that, we kind of had to rearrange our schedule because we weren't used to meeting that early. And I think just being flexible, keeping the energy going, as Kelly said, keep the train going, and continuing to pick it up and make sure that we can keep the team meeting on a regular schedule.
People just starting out in transition really need to find somebody else. I can't say enough about just sort of having somebody else in my building. Having somebody else in your district would be fantastic. Having somebody else in your building, that day-to-day sort of struggle that you might have, trying to get something going, or trying to get somebody to notice, something that you just feel is so important for a student, getting somebody else on board. So find somebody else to partner with. You won't run out of gas, as quickly. And to set some really reasonable but attainable goals, and give yourself time to do that. So for us, it's always been this school year, September to June. This is our goal. And we're gonna have a finished product by June, something that we can be really proud of. Find the people who can help you execute that goal, and stay on them, just kind of keep those conversations going, and keep it alive. But don't overwhelm yourself with 10 goals and a really short time frame. I think if you even focus on 1 or 2 students that have something in their transition plan that's just so important, that has to happen, that's a great goal to have, so that when you finish the year, you have 1 or 2 students that you can look back and say, wow, this was a really successful transition. This was a goal for the student and their family, and we made it happen. And then take what you've learned from that and then transfer it to the next student, and hopefully that will keep the momentum going.
I think for people who were involved in the transition specialist endorsement, one of the things that I regretted was not holding on to all of the resources that were presented to us in the different classes, and a lot of them I did bookmark and give myself some way to remind myself later, but I think that's really important. So many resources there I came back to later on, or I had to rediscover, and they became very useful in the development of the team. So make a list of every resource that comes across your plate and hold on to it. You know, when we were just starting out, of course the worry is, will anyone show up to a meeting? And you put a lot of time and effort into it, and you want it to be successful, and we still do. And I think to some degree we still have that worry, the jitters before every meeting that we have. And I think part of it is you just have to realize that I think the model works and people want to be involved, and you don't necessarily trust that right away. But more and more we've seen that agencies want to be there. They're looking for a way to connect with school districts and to get the word out about the services they have to offer and get connected to students. And that's one of the vital things that an interagency team can offer. So I would keep that in mind.
And one thing to not worry about is that this doesn't mean anything to anybody else. It's just me. You know, it's so important. You're going to run into people who are like, this is so important. You hear from families who have left and graduation has come and gone and the party's over, and they are either on the college campus or trying to, make it in the workforce. And you hear from the family and you realize how important this work is, and how successful students can be with even just sort of the most minimal amount of support or planning. You can really kind of get that back tenfold later on. So one thing you don't have to worry about is that nobody else thinks it's important, because I think we all know how important it is, because we see, how successful kids can be. Yeah, I think, the biggest challenge for us this year is that there's been sort of this let down after the fair, the transition fair that we had. So one of the challenges we have is our schedule's a little bit off. We had a set schedule for 2 years where we counted on people coming, and they were sort of in a rhythm of meeting, and we disrupted that a little bit. So we're coming off of the transition fair, which was just fantastic, but now we need to get people back again. And we were always working on something, whether it was the transition checklist, the website, or the transition fair. And we might have sort of not left them with another hook, another action item. So we were talking about that earlier, that maybe we should have had our next project sort of waiting in the wings so that we can get people fired up about that. So that's been a challenge for us. We have had some shift in membership, so we needed to reach back out to some folks, and kind of some staffing changes have happened within the agency, so we've had to go back and find those folks again. It's a little easier this time because we know what we're looking for. So those are some of the challenges.
Yeah, I think too, like Kelly said, kind of figuring out how the dynamics change in the agencies, and even within our own school, we've had to figure out, as staff have changed in the school, who are the key players now? Who do we want to keep involved? And even on the subcommittee, who's going to be important to get involved in the subcommittee? And we have a meeting coming up next month for our subcommittee, and we really want to figure out how can we shift some of the responsibility away from Kelly and myself and into the hands of the subcommittee, so that we're all collaboratively making decisions about where the team should go and what activities we can be working on, and just kind of spreading around ownership for it, which is really something that we haven't, we've done a little bit in the past, but we haven't really focused on it, because Kelly and I were kind of driving the train, so to speak. So that's something that we want to look at. And I think also one of the priorities that I'm thinking about is how can we connect with other districts? And I think that if we could find more ways to partner with other districts, that we can just kind of increase the benefit of the meetings and of the different action items that we're working on. After having the transition fair and after hearing from a lot of people from other districts who have contacted us, we see that there's a lot of transition specialists out there that want to do great things in their school and want to make these kind of connections and establish teams of their own. So I think that there's definitely room for connecting districts and kind of facing those challenges together.
Feeding people is important at meetings, and give them what they want. We found that caffeine really helps. Chocolate definitely helps, because our meetings are 2 to 3:30, so people are looking for that sugar high to get them through. And there's cookies. Definitely have things that people like. We had one member show up at a meeting, and we happened to have her favorite cookie, and she just kept coming back, and so we just kept buying the cookies. So whatever works, and ask them what they want. You know, some people don't like to show up to a fruit plate and a granola bar. They want, you know, what keeps them going. So that's important too.
The website that we began was really the first project that the team initiated, and it sprang out of this desire to do resource mapping. You know, how we started to realize we've got a lot of resources and we're learning about more resources from these agencies, so how can we get that out to families? And the website just seemed like a good place to start. So we had, when we started it, we had very minimal expectations for how it would be designed and what kind of information we would be putting on it. And what I just want to say about it is a lot of people have asked about the website and, you know, how could we do something like that in our own district? And it's definitely possible. I think if you start small and allow it to be something that grows over time, there's a lot of free website builders out there. It doesn't have to be a huge monetary investment. In fact, right now we're paying $10 a year for the domain name, and that's really it. And of course, you have to have someone that enjoys doing it. I personally enjoy doing it. And we've, last year we recruited another member of the team who learned how to update the site and put some other agency profiles on it. And so that was a huge help. But I think that's something that really every district could benefit from having. And we hear from parents a lot that they really enjoy looking at the website, and it's a place where they can get that information where they might have forgot to ask the question at the team meeting, or they might not even realize that that's a question they should be asking until they get to the site and they are able to dig into some of the transition related information that's on it. So I would encourage anybody who's interested to go for it and just start small and go from there.
I just can't say enough about the need for certainly the work that you do in class and looking at those assessments, but just sort of using those assessments. I mean, before person-centered planning, I think students should be sitting down with even sort of the most brief inventory checklist around, you know, careers, or if it's independent living skills. There's got to be some place to start, and I believe it's always with assessment. We do assessments we do large assessments. We have about 100 students in our department, so we'll assess all of them with maybe something like the Casey Life Skills Assessment, a portion of that. And then before every IEP meeting or some reeval, we're always doing a more comprehensive assessment with kids, usually sometimes 2 or 3, to touch upon different areas. I think in order to write the goals, and I think in order to do any kind of, like I said, person-centered planning, I think to include the family. I think a lot of times the families just don't know where to start. Even if you're just sort of ruling out, these are skills that the student has mastered, we're just not going to talk about them because we don't need to focus on them. But families just sometimes don't know where to begin, and I think that some of the assessments really just help do the framework to start those conversations and to get what needs to be on the ed plan, to get it there. And I think that you've got to show progress, right? So if you have a student for 4 years, you know, you've got to really show that this student's getting ready to go, and that makes them feel like they're ready to go. Like, wow, you've really made some progress, and to have that data for them. Some of the assessments are cumbersome. They're much too big. They take way too much time. So what we've been doing is just sort of taking bits and pieces of them, and that's okay. You know, time is better spent sort of having the student do something that is appropriate for them under an appropriate time frame, and then just looking at that data and maybe just chunking it throughout the school year instead of sitting and putting, you know, a student or even sometimes faculty through a very comprehensive assessment with just almost too much information. You know, when people work with a student one-to-one for that amount of time, they know where the student needs to be. They know what the goal areas are, and then the assessment just kind of really helps you fill in that information. So you've got to be familiar with the assessments. We have a great list of assessments on our website. So if you go there, it's a really great place to just start and see what's out there. There's links to all of them, whether it's self-determination, daily living skills, vocational, it's all there. So I can't encourage people to, don't be afraid, just sort of jump in and try them out.